Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another installment of our visiting lecture series here in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at the University of Macau. It's a somewhat special edition, given that it'll be the last before the Chinese New Year begins. And also because we have not one, but two speakers joining us today to deliver a joint presentation of some of their collaborative research. We have, first of all, Professor Kengo Miyazono, who is an associate professor of philosophy at Hokkaido University in Japan. His research areas include the philosophy of mind, psychology, and cognitive science. He's written extensively on topics such as delusion, irrationality, the psychology of irrational belief, self-knowledge, the boundaries of the mind and cognition. He's joined by Kiichi Inarimori, who is a PhD student at Hokkaido University in Japan, working in collaboration with Professor Miyazono. Kiichi's research topics include free will, experimental philosophy, and philosophical methodology, having published work on empathy and its relation to current debates on egoism and altruism, having written a little bit about the experimental philosophy of free will. Today, these philosophers are presenting work by the title Philosophical Expertise and Acquisitions of Intuitions, a little bit of meta-philosophy, which may be of special interest to those who were in attendance last semester for our meta-philosophy seminar. As usual, our procedure will be fairly straightforward. Our presenters will present for anywhere between 50 to 60 minutes, followed by 30 to 40 minutes approximately of Q&A. So, without further ado, I would love if we could all come together in welcoming our speakers, and then I will let them begin.
All right. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for inviting us to this lecture series. It's really wonderful. Of course, it would have been even better if we were actually physically there, but this time we are just remotely participating. I miss Macau. I visited there several years ago before COVID, and then since then I haven't been able to visit there again. So hopefully at some point in the near future, Kiichi and I can physically be there. But at least today we're gonna do this online. All right. So Kiichi, can you
okay.
so, yeah, turn the slide, please. Yeah. So we're gonna. Oh yeah. Oh, that's fine. So we're gonna talk about expertise, philosophical expertise in particular. And the main idea that we are interested in is the idea of what we call acquisition expertise. This kind of expertise is contrasted with what we call reliability expertise, which is the main topic of so-called expertise defense in meta-philosophy and philosophical methodology. So there is a debate in experimental philosophy and philosophical methodology in general, the debate as to whether intuition-based methodology in traditional philosophy, traditional epistemology, metaphysics, philosophy of language, whether this kind of methodology is a good one or not. It looks as though there is some good empirical evidence coming from XFI, or so-called negative program in XFI, seemingly showing that people's intuition about imaginary cases in philosophy are not very reliable because they are vulnerable to mistakes, errors, and distorting factors, irrelevant factors, and so on and so forth. In response to the this worry coming from X-Fi, some people started talking about philosophical expertise. This is what we call reliability expertise. So the idea is that, well, actually, the subjects of those X-Fi studies tend to be non-philosophers, lay people, but probably we philosophers, professional philosophers, can be better than that. So the idea is that there is a kind of philosophical expertise in virtue of which perhaps we have more reliable intuitions. Right. So that's the main idea of so-called expertise. And then we use the term reliability expertise to refer to the kind of expertise people are talking about in this debate, right? So that's the kind of expertise in virtue of which philosophers allegedly have better intuitions about philosophical issues. There are, in fact, theoretical and empirical concerns about this kind of idea, the idea of philosophers having reliability expertise. We're gonna talk a little bit about that in a minute. But that's not what we want to talk about. What we want to talk about today, the main idea of our talk is what we call acquisition expertise, which is contrasted with reliability expertise. So this is the kind of expertise in virtue of which philosophers, professional philosophers like us, have genuine intuitions in the first place. So the intuitions we have, the professional philosophers have, might or might not be reliable, more reliable than intuitions of lay people. But acquisition expertise refers to this idea that, well, but we actually do have a kind of expertise in virtue of which we have genuine intuitions about some particular philosophical issues. Lay people don't have it, so they don't have genuine intuitions about about some philosophical issues. So that's what we're interested in this talk. What we do today, in the first half, I will be going through. So I'm responsible for the first half, and Kiichi is responsible for the second half. The first half, I will be, I'll do some ground clearing. I talk about some conceptual distinctions, and then I'll give you some basic idea and characterization of acquisition expertise. So that's what I will do in the first half of our talk. In the second half, Kiichi is going to talk about our experimental study, which is in support of the idea of acquisition expertise. So first half, kind of roughly theoretical. The second half, experimental. So that's the division of labor today. All right, next page, please. The next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So a little bit more on reliability expertise and expertise defense. So this is the idea in so-called expertise defense. The idea is that philosophers have special kind of expertise in virtue of which their intuitions are more reliable than intuitions of lay people without any professional philosophical training. So maybe this is a response to the experimentalist challenge to intuition-based philosophical methodology, where it looks as though intuitions people have about philosophical issues are sensitive to and distorted by obviously irrelevant factors such as order effect. So maybe your intuition is different when the material is presented in different order, or your intuition can be sensitive to the framing, the how question is framed or how the scenario is framed. Obviously, things like the order of the scenarios or the framing of question are these kind of things are irrelevant to the truth of philosophical issues we are interested in. So, for example, in epistemology, we want to know about nature of knowledge and its relation to true belief. So that's the kind of thing we're interested in. And but our intuition with regard to attribution of knowledge can be sensitive to the order in which the given scenario is presented. But the order of the scenario is obviously irrelevant to the nature of knowledge and its relation to true belief. So, according to experimentalist challenge, it looks as though intuitions of lay people, at least, are distorted by, they are sensitive to and distorted by these kind of irrelevant factors. So that's the experimental challenge. In response, expertise defense, just this idea of expertise defense says that, well, but that's only lay people. Maybe we philosophers can do better than that. Maybe we have some philosophical expertise they don't have, and perhaps because of the kind of expertise we have, maybe our intuitions are more reliable than the intuitions of lay people. Maybe our intuitions are not so sensitive to the kind of relevant factors. So that's the expertise defense. That's reliability expertise. There are empirical and theoretical concerns and worries about expertise defense. One of them is that this idea of reliability expertise can be empirically tested. So you can actually look at whether philosophers, professional philosophers, or the students with some kind of expertise, whether their intuitions are more they actually sensitive to the kind of irrelevant factors. And there are several empirical investigations of this. It looks as though maybe philosophers' intuitions are not so better than lay people's intuitions. So maybe we can't be so optimistic about this idea of reliability expertise we have. So we're not going to talk about this. Rather, we are going to talk about another slightly different kind of expertise. That's the acquisition expertise, right? Yeah. So yeah. Can you go to the next slide? Oh yeah. So this is the acquisition expertise. This is a different idea, different from reliability expertise. So here is a definition of acquisition expertise, and that's on the slide. So expert philosophers have the acquisition expertise on the topic T, if and only if they have some expertise which is typically acquired or developed in professional training, in virtue of which expert philosophers have genuine intuitions about T, while non-experts do not have genuine intuition about T. And the crucial, so here the genuine intuition is a technical notion. And what we mean by this is that, so we define general intuitions as intuitions that are based on full possession of relevant concept. So in other words, you have genuine intuition about something if and only if you have full possession of relevant concept. So that's the idea. Okay, what's the full possession of concept? Well, we don't have any explicit definition of full possession of concept, but the basic idea is that you really understand the concept at issue. So that's the idea. But what we don't have any explicit definition of full possession of concept, but we have one crucial necessary condition for you to have full possession of a concept, which is that fully possessing a concept C is incompatible with conceptual confusion about C or having a conceptually confused belief about C. So we got this idea from Bieler. Oh yeah, so the notion of full possession of a concept is something we borrow from Bieler. And he says that, so this is his idea, the full possession of a concept is so the idea is that if you are conceptually confused about concept C, then you don't fully possess the concept. So that's the idea. So in other words, a necessary condition for you to have full possession of concept C is that you don't have any conceptual confusion about C. So that's the idea. Bieler's example is Tyler Burge's famous arthritis case. So so let's say the person in this case, let's call him Ken. Ken has the conceptually confused belief that he has arthritis in his thigh. This is conceptually confused because arthritis is, by definition, by the conceptual definition, arthritis is something that happens only at joints. So you can't, conceptually, you can't have arthritis in his thigh, but somehow Ken says that he has arthritis in his thigh. And Burge, so this is Burge's claim, that Ken actually has the belief that he has arthritis in his thigh. Obviously, this idea is related to his externalism about meaning and concept. So the idea here is that, so our crucial point about for our purpose here is that Ken does not fully possess the concept of arthritis because he's basically conceptually confused about arthritis. So so that's the reason why he does not fully possess the concept of arthritis. We could still say, I mean, this is what Bieler says, we could still say that he nominally possesses the concept arthritis. Well, why? Well, because if Burge is correct, if you accept some kind of externalism about mental content, we attribute the belief that he has arthritis in his thigh. So Ken has this belief. But then, in order for Ken to have this belief that he has arthritis in his thigh, probably you need to have, he needs to have concept arthritis in some sense. We need to say that in some sense he has the concept arthritis. Otherwise, you can't have belief that he you have arthritis in his thigh. So yeah, so if we accept externalism about meaning and a concept, we could say there's a sense in which he possessed the concept arthritis. That's why he can have belief about arthritis. But the crucial thing is that he doesn't fully possess the concept arthritis, because full possession of the concept is incompatible with conceptually confused about the concept. So that's the idea. All right, next slide, please. Yeah, so our idea here, the crucial idea here is that acquisition expertise enables genuine intuitions. So the idea is that at least in some philosophical domains, having genuine intuitions about philosophical concept C requires acquisition expertise, which enables full possession of the concept C. So in other words, you need to have some kind of philosophical expertise in order to fully possess the concept C, which is necessary for you to have genuine intuitions about the concept C. So that's the idea, right? Another way of putting it is that if you don't have any philosophical training, if not a philosopher, you haven't taken any philosophy courses at college, then you don't have the kind of expertise we are talking about. And because of that, you don't fully possess the concept, which implies that you don't have genuine intuitions about the concept. So that's the idea. So only philosophers have genuine intuitions. Maybe we could say that the lay people have some intuitions about the concept, about the issue, but but they are not genuine intuitions. Maybe there are only nominal intuitions, probably because they are, somehow conceptually confused about the relevant concept. One note here is that we only claim that philosophers have genuine intuitions about some concept, which does not guarantee that philosophers' intuitions are reliable. It does not imply, for example, that the philosophers' intuitions are not distorted by relevant factors like order effect or framing effect. So we're not committed to any of that. Our hypothesis is just that only philosophers have genuine intuitions, because only philosophers have full possession of relevant concept, at least in some cases. So that's the idea. Next slide, please. So there's a slightly relevant discussion in the literature. So the on the face of it, the acquisition expertise is implausible, you might think, because not only philosophers but also lay people seem to have intuitions, and probably they have genuine intuitions about philosophical issues, right? So the idea is that the kind of thought experiments we talk about, or kind of imaginary cases we talk about in philosophy, and we can ask the same questions, the kind of questions we talk about, we can ask the same questions to lay people, and then they actually give us their intuitive answers to the question. So for example, we talk about Gettier cases or fake bound case, and then we can just present the same thing, like Gettier cases or fake bound cases, to lay people, and then they give us their intuitive answers, intuitive responses to these cases. So on the face of it, not only philosophers but also lay people seem to have genuine intuitions about philosophical questions. And that's exactly what Ryberg says in his 2013 paper. So he says that there's a crucial difference between the kind of expertise the expertise in chess, like mathematics on one hand, and expertise in philosophy on the other hand. So the idea is that in complex puzzle about mathematics or very difficult case in chess, lay people don't have any intuitions whatsoever. But only professional mathematicians have intuitions about the kind of problems, or only chess masters have intuitions about the kind of scenarios. On the other hand, so that's chess and mathematics, right? So in those cases, professionals have intuitions, lay people don't have any intuitions whatsoever. But Ryberg says that philosophy is different, or he actually talks about moral philosophy. He argues that the moral philosophy is different because in the kind of problems we're talking about in moral philosophy, not only professional philosophers or ethicists, but also lay people have intuitive responses. So, for example, trolley cases, not only philosophers and ethicists, but also lay people have they have their intuitive responses to trolley cases, for example. So that's, according to Ryberg, is a crucial difference between expertise in chess and mathematics on one hand, and expertise in moral philosophy on the other hand. Now, we agree with Ryberg, at least we agree that on the face of it, lay people seem to have intuitions about philosophical cases, but we actually need to look at evidence. So we think that it is actually an empirical issue as to whether, so we think that it is actually an empirical issue that they actually have genuine intuitions, whether lay people have genuine intuitions about philosophical issues, because it is an empirical issue that lay people are committed to some kind of conceptual confusions about relevant concepts. So that's the reason why we need to look into actual evidence and empirical evidence concerning whether lay people actually have relevant concepts. They do have full possession of relevant concept. So that's the reason why we're going to turn to empirical studies of folk intuitions, lay people intuition. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so this is we turn to a case study, which is the experimental philosophy of free will. So that's something we're going to focus on. The central issue in free will debate, in traditional free will debate, and experimental philosophy as well, is whether free will and determinism are compatible or not. So whether compatibilist about free will is correct, or incompatibilism about free will is correct. So XY of free will looks at folk intuitions about folk intuitions about compatibilism or incompatibilism. So typically what they do is to present a description of a deterministic universe, and then they ask their intuitions as to whether the free will is possible in that universe or not. And they do that with using XY methodology. So that's roughly speaking, that's what they do in the experimental philosophy of free will. One crucial problem which has been discussed recently is the problem of so-called comprehension error. So which is that it looks as though they do not fully understand what determinism is. And because they do not seem to have full understanding of what determinism is, we don't know what to say about their intuitions. Because if you don't really understand what determinism is, then you're not gonna have any reliable or variable intuition about the compatibility or incompatibility between determinism and free will. You don't understand what determinism is. So that's a crucial problem in the recent discussion of experimental philosophy of free will. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so this is an example of determinism, a deterministic scenario which is used in XY of free will. So this scenario is by Nichols and Knob, 2007. So I'll just go through it very quickly. Imagine a universe A, in which everything that happens is completely caused by whatever happened before it. This is true from the very beginning of the universe. So what happened in the beginning of the universe caused what happened next, and so on, right up until the present. For example, one day, John decided to have French fries at lunch. Like everything else, this decision was completely caused by what happened before it. So if everything in this universe was exactly the same up to until John made his decision, then it had to happen that John would decide to have French fries. So this is the description of deterministic universe A. So what they ask in XY of free will is whether John, for example, can have free will with regard to his decision to have French fries at lunch, for example. The next slide, please. So it looks as though there are at least two kinds of so-called comprehension errors. Their failure to understand determinism correctly. So one kind of comprehension error is called bypassing. So which is that it looks as though they seem to be confused. The people seem to be confused between determinism and bypassing, where bypassing refers to this idea that a person's mental states, like belief and desire, and the emotions do not have any causal efficacy with regard to the person's action. So conceptually, determinism and bypassing are distinct because even in the deterministic universe, we can make sense of this idea that a person in the deterministic universe has belief and desire and emotions which do have causal efficacy with regard to actions. So there's nothing, nothing conceptually. So that's a totally coherent possibility. So deterministic universe and a bypassing universe are distinct, so they are not the same. But it looks as though if you look at empirical data about how lay people respond to deterministic scenario, it looks as though many lay people seem to be confused between the distinction between determinism and bypassing. The next slide, please. The second kind of comprehension error is so-called inclusion. So the idea is that so this is actually this seems to be happening in at least some people, which is that they mistakenly smuggle in some non-deterministic assumptions into the understanding of determinism. So the idea is that even if the universe, for example, the universe A in that scenario, the Jones case, the case is obviously and clearly described and presented as a deterministic universe, still they somehow smuggle in the non-deterministic assumptions about how the world works, which is an error because the universe is obviously described as a deterministic universe, so you can't smuggle in those non-deterministic assumptions in understanding and interpretation of how that world works. The next slide, please. So, and if you look at both kinds of comprehension errors, the bypassing error and the intrusion error, and if you put them together, it looks as though the comprehension errors are very, very widespread. So in a recent paper by Nederhofer and colleagues, they argue that most people, even those who pass the standard comprehension check, actually fail to understand determinism either because they are committed to bypassing error or because they are committed to the intrusion error. So, for example, the 90% of the participants in their study are committed to bypassing error, and 67% of them are committed to intrusion error. So it looks as though most people so the participants, lay people, don't really understand determinism. The next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the bypassing statement. So these are sample bypassing statements they use, Nederhofer and colleagues actually use. So for example, the first one, for example, is that what people want and believe has no effect on what they do. So this is an expression of the idea of bypassing. Obviously, the determinism does not imply this bypassing statement. Nonetheless, so many people are somehow committed to the truth of something like that. The next slide, please. So intrusion statements are something like these on the slide. For example, the first item is that what people decide to do could have been different even if everything leading up to the decision had been exactly the same. And this is a non-deterministic assumption. This one is incompatible with the deterministic assumption. Nonetheless, many people, like 67 or something like that, are actually committed to the truth of something like that. So again, lots of people are committed to some kind of some kind of error with regard to determinism, what determinism is. Right, the next slide, please.
Oh, maybe we can stop, skip this slide.
Oh yeah, yeah. So just one quick thing about what we do here in Hokkaido, Kiichi and me, and our team in Hokkaido did something very similar in Japan as well. We have a large scale. We had a large scale survey. It's over 1,000 participants, and we did pretty much the same thing in Japan as well. Again, so we're not going to go into the details, but we roughly replicate the same kind of result, which is that so many people are committed to some kind of comprehension error with regard to determinism. So only 1.2% of our participants actually pass both kinds of comprehension error, the comprehension check about bypassing and a comprehension check about bypassing. Only 1%, roughly 1% of them pass both kind of checks. Okay, we can go next. Now, so that was what has been happening in the literature in the X-Fi of free will, and this is our hypothesis about what is going on in lay people, which is that. So this is what we call conceptual confusion hypothesis. So roughly speaking, the idea is that lay people are committed to conceptual confusion about determinism. And they are committed to conceptual confusion about determinism rather than any other different kind of errors. So in other words, the idea is that the kind of mistake they are committed to is conceptual one rather than some other kind of errors. So that's the conceptual confusion hypothesis. And if that's the case, if this hypothesis is true, if it is actually true that they are conceptually confused about determinism, it implies that lay people can't have genuine intuitions about determinism, where genuine intuition is understood according to our definition above. Namely, genuine intuition is something you have when you have full possession of relevant concept, and the full possession of relevant concept is incompatible with being conceptually confused about the concept. So our hypothesis here is that lay people lack the acquisition expertise. So they don't have kind of a philosophical expertise. We actually have it, professional philosophers have it, because of which we fully grasp and possess the concept of determinism. And because of that, we have genuine intuitions about determinism. So that's our hypothesis. Next slide, please. And then our main argument for acquisition expertise has two premises and one conclusion. So premise one says that given empirical evidence about comprehension errors, the kind of evidence I just talked about, so that's coming from the literature of X-Fi on free will, given that kind of empirical evidence, the conceptual confusion hypothesis is plausible. In other words, it is plausible that lay people are conceptually confused about determinism. So that's premise one. Premise two, given the conceptual confusion hypothesis, philosophers do have the acquisition expertise. We professional philosophers have the kind of expertise because of which we can have genuine philosophical intuitions about determinism. Conclusion: philosophers do have acquisition expertise. So that's our main argument. And the next slide, please. So what we are going to talk about now is what we want to focus on is the first premise of our argument, which is the premise that given the empirical evidence, the conceptual confusion hypothesis is plausible. So that's what we want to focus on now, because we think actually that the premise one is not very strong at this moment. In other words, we need a better support of the premise. The reason is that there are actually two possible interpretations of the empirical data about comprehension errors in the literature. So the two interpretations, one of them is entailment interpretation. So the idea is that people, the lay people, are actually committed to the entailment claim between determinism and bypassing. So and then this entailment is a conceptual one. So the idea is that they believe something like this: determinism conceptually entails bypassing or something like that. And then this interpretation is consistent with our hypothesis, the conceptual confusion hypothesis, because if they are committed to something like this, so determinism conceptually entails bypassing, we can say that they are conceptually confused because obviously determinism does not entail bypassing conceptually. So if this interpretation is correct, then we can say that they are conceptually confused. The conceptual confusion hypothesis is plausible, so that's good. So that's good for us. So that's our hypothesis, but that's only one interpretation of the data. The other interpretation of data is what we call the bias interpretation, which is that they are actually not conceptually confused. They don't actually believe that determinism conceptually entails bypassing or something like that. Rather, their belief is something like, for some reasons, this particular universe, for example, the universe A in John's case, that particular universe is the kind of universe where bypassing is true. And you can believe this without being committed to the entailment thesis or conceptual entailment thesis. You only say that somehow that universe, the universe A, the particular universe, the universe A, is both deterministic and bypassing. You can believe this without being committed to much stronger claim that okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. So that's the bias interpretation. And the crucial thing about bias interpretation is that the crucial thing about it is that you can explain the data without ascribing conceptual confusion to people, because maybe people are not conceptually confused. They are just thinking that for some reasons, maybe the biases, they somehow think that the particular universe, the universe A, is bypassing. It's the kind of universe where bypassing is true. The next slide, please.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So we're gonna skip this.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was about, yeah, we can skip this. So here's the thing. So the summarizing so far, so we have actually two interpretations of empirical data: entailment interpretation and a bias interpretation. Entailment interpretation is supportive of our claim. If that's the case, the people are actually conceptually confused. Bias interpretation is not very supportive of our claim because probably they are not conceptually confused. The last part, sorry, sorry, Kiichi, you only have 10 minutes or something. Sorry. so the Kiichi is going to talk about our new empirical study to investigate which hypothesis, which interpretation is correct. So go ahead,
Okay.
Kiichi.
Yeah, so now my part. So as Kengo have already explained, there are two possible interpretations about lay people's agreements to bypassing statements: entailment interpretation and bias interpretation. And in order to empirically support our argument, especially the premise one, the first premise of our argument, we need to verify which interpretation is plausible. And we made two predictions. The first prediction is that if entailment interpretation is correct, then when people are asked how many of deterministic universes is bypassing universes, then people should answer that all deterministic universes include bypassing. Because if this interpretation is correct, people do conceptually misunderstand that determinism itself entails bypassing. On the other hand, we predicted that if bias interpretation is correct, then when people are asked how many of these deterministic universes do you think bypassing is true, then people should not answer that all deterministic universes include bypassing. Because if bypass interpretation is correct, then people simply have a biased tendency to answer that that particular universe is bypassing universe, rather than conceptually confusing bypassing and determinism. So if bias interpretation is correct, people should not answer that all deterministic universes include bypassing. And given these predictions, we conducted one experiment in order to demonstrate whether people conceptually confuse determinism bypassing or simply having biased tendency. So here's their research method. We conducted experimental quadrics and recruited 200 native English speakers from Prolific, and they were divided into two conditions: frequency conditions and control conditions. And we conducted our experiments using scenario from Nichols and Knopf, as Kengo already have introduced. And we have used bypassing statements and intrusion statements used in Ederhofer and Kalix's research. So we use this description of determinism and these bypassing statements and intrusion statements. So let me explain the concrete procedure in each conditions. So let me begin with the control conditions. In the case of control conditions, the procedures are quite simple. First, participants were presented with a description of determinism, and after that, participants were asked to answer standard questions about attributions of free will, attribution of moral responsibility, like, do you think is it possible for the person to be free in this universe, or do you think is it possible for the person to be fully morally responsible for her actions, like this? And after that, participants were asked to answer the surface comprehension check about the given scenario. And after these procedures, participants were given bypassing statement and intrusion statements in random orders and answered their agreements to these statements in 7-point Likert scale. And that's all. And in frequency conditions, so the procedure until here is the same. So in frequency conditions, participants were also given the description of determinism and asked to answer standard questions. And after that, they were asked to imagine 100 universes just like universe A, and given instructions about what sentences are true in all, some, no universes. So we gave this instruction to participants in order to make participants understand the distinction of three kinds of truth: necessary truth, contingent truth, and necessary untruth. And we wanted participants to understand the distinction of these truths in order to investigate whether people believe bypassing is determinism is conceptual truth, in other words, necessary truth or not. And here's their actual script we used in the experiments. So participants were asked to read this script. So let me read quickly. So now suppose that there are 100 universes just like universe N. Some statements are true in all of these universes, while other statements are false in some of or all of them. Here are some examples. Isosceles triangles are triangles, true in all 100 universes. Big suns are female foxes, true in all 100 universes. So these are true in all 100 universes because these are conceptual or necessary truth. And Everest is the highest mountain in the world, true in some of the 100 universes. Joe Biden is the 46th president of the United States, true in some of the 100 universes. Because these statements are true in some of the 100 universes because these statements are contingent truth. And sacral triangles exist true in no universe. Surgeons are not doctors, true in no universe. These true statements are true in no universe because these are necessary untruth. So after reading these examples, we asked these questions in order to ascertain whether participants do understand the distinction of three kinds of truth: the necessary truth, contingent truth, necessary untruth. And here's the questions. Actually, now China does not have the largest population in the world. India has the largest population, but when we conducted this experiment, China still had the largest population. So China has the largest population in the world that organisms are alive, no matter is married. The correct answer to each question are some to the first, because this is a contingent truth, and no to the second, because this is conceptually necessary untruth, and all to the third, because this is their conceptual truth. After answered these questions, participants were given this instruction. In every 100 universes, just like universe A, only one day, a man named John decided to have French fries at lunch. And like everything else, this decision was completely caused by what happened before it. So in how many of these universes do you think the following statements are true? And following these statements, participants were given bypassing statements and 4 intrusion statements, and also 2 statements for attention check in randomized order. And participants were answered to each statement from all or some or no. So before getting into the results part, I need to explain how we analyze the data, because we gave
Hey Ben,
Hello. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna switch it to.
oh, okay.
Hi.
It looks
Yeah,
as
he
though,
appears to be frozen on our end as well.
okay,
Quite
okay.
an enduring freeze, actually.
Okay. So what can we do?
At least he's smiling in the frozen image. That's nice.
Right, right. I can do that, I think.
Except that the
If
slides left with him. I don't know if you have your
no,
own copy.
I do have it.
Okay, great.
So I can do that. Okay, let me do this.
Note that it's 6:30 at this time, so
Oh, I know. Okay,
speed is of the essence. Thanks.
good. No. So hopefully you can see this. Yeah, good.
We can, yes.
So so maybe I don't need to. Well, first of all, I don't. He's responsible for the experiment. So I'm not super good at talking about the details of the experiment. So rather than getting into the details, I will just give you the result of what actually happened. So I just quickly. The first of all, most people classify the bypass as a conceptual truth, which means that many people say that all 100 universes, all 100 deterministic universes are universes where bypassing is true, which is to say that they take bypassing to be conceptually truth. Right. And then the other one is this is what was it? Well, I'll just skip this one. No, we can skip this one. Yeah. So that was the and in essence, the most people seem to be thinking that all 100 universes that are deterministic and the bypassing is true in all of them, which seem to support the entailment interpretation. So it looks as though lay people are actually committed to this conceptual entailment of determinism to bypassing. So that's the reason why they think that all deterministic universes, 100 of them, are the universes where bypassing is also true. So it's not just that it happens to be the case that a particular universe, like universe A, that's where determinism and bypassing happen to be true. It's not just that; they are actually committed to the conceptual entailment thesis. So that seems to be the result of our study.
Sorry,
Yeah.
now I'm back.
Okay, good. So I'm just going through it. So maybe I can do that for you. So yeah, that's what it is. Good. So lay people conceptually confuse determinism with bypassing. At least that seemed to be the result of our study. But then we can be a bit more confident about our argument for acquisition and expertise. It looks as though the given empirical evidence about comprehension errors, the conceptual confusion hypothesis is plausible. They seem to be conceptually confused about what determinism is because they seem to be committed to the conceptual error where determinism conceptually entails bypassing. But then it looks as though they don't have full possession of the concept of determinism. Therefore, they do not seem to have genuine intuitions about determinism. Hopefully, we philosophers are not committed to this kind of error. Hopefully, we philosophers have genuine intuitions and about determinism. If that's the case, we seem to have acquisition expertise in virtue of which we can have genuine intuition about determinism at least. So that was the conclusion. Yeah, so just to recap what we talk about. So our main idea is this idea of acquisition expertise, which is contrasted with reliability expertise. reliability expertise about reliability of intuitions of the philosophers. Rather, what we are interested in is this idea that only philosophers have genuine intuitions about determinism, for example, because only philosophers have full possession of the concept determinism. Lay people don't have it because they are conceptually confused about determinism. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Let's thank our speakers. Hopefully you can hear the applause through the microphone. Okay, so we have what looks to me to be around 24, 25 minutes for questions. I'll moderate on your collective behalf if you prefer, and then you can just focus on the questions that way. So
yeah, that'll be great.
I'll take a cue from those in the room and also make space for those online. I saw a hand immediately from you in the back. If you'd like to go first, I guess I'll bring you a microphone since they won't be able to hear you otherwise. And then I think we have Nevia in the chat, and then it'll be Victoria. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a really great talk, and I really enjoyed it. Just like there's one question that I have in mind. Do you think there's something more to philosophers than to non-philosophers? Like if we like train some non-philosophers to possess the full relevant conceptions around a topic, like say T, and we also like a philosopher, professional philosopher, to possess a full conception, relevant conception around the topic T. Do you think the non-philosophers can also have genuine intuitions about the topic, or is there something more to who are philosophers that make them like different from non-philosophers? Thanks.
Yeah, good. Yeah, very good question. So we actually have two different hypotheses about why why philosophers can have genuine intuitions and full position of the concept. One hypothesis is that somehow philosophers have some general abilities to think about conceptual distinctions carefully, for example. So the kind of general abilities we have that we develop through philosophical training or things like that. Then once you go through this kind of training, all kinds of philosophers are able to distinguish different concepts. For example, the concept of determinism from the concept of bypassing. So that's one hypothesis. The other hypothesis is that actually it's not because of this kind of general ability as philosophers, but rather it's more about more specific knowledge or background knowledge or ability that you acquire when you work on philosophy of free will, for example. So maybe those who actually work on philosophy of free will, somebody who have written dissertations on that topic, so they do have genuine philosophy, genuine intuitions about determinism. But if you work on metaethics or like epistemology, maybe you don't have genuine intuitions about free will, about determinism. So there are two different possibilities and different hypotheses about how this kind of expertise comes about. So depending on that, I think our answer to your question would be different. The kind of thing lay people need to go through in order to have genuine intuitions about determinism. So in the first case, the first possibility is true, then the lay people can go through some general philosophical training. Maybe they take some general philosophical introduction to philosophy course or something where they learn some basic philosophical training or something, and then they can have full possession of the concept of determinism. If the second possibility is true, then you need to be actually you need to be a philosopher working on free will. So so depend. So that's the two possibilities.
All right, thanks.
Okay, Nevia, did you have a hand raised or was that the clapping
Yes.
function? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, Kengo. Nice to see you. Hopefully next time in person. So very interesting study, and I think it's a very promising to speak in terms in this field speak in terms of genuine intuitions. I really like that idea. I have two questions. So the first one is, it seems that the study delivers good news to us philosophers. However, especially in the first part of your talk, you seem to stress the idea that genuine intuitions do not imply reliability, in the sense
That's right.
that
That's right.
intuitions may still be sensitive to some kind of distortion. So it seems like you intend to really separate reliability, the
Right.
idea of reliability, from the concept of genuine intuition. So this means that after all, once we have the good news that philosophers are able to have genuine intuitions, then that news is not that good, because then even having a genuine intuition does not offer you any guarantee, not even as a matter of degree. From what you say, it seems like there is even not a higher degree of reliability about genuine intuitions with respect to non-genuine intuitions, which seems to me kind of a counterintuitive, meaning there must be a way in which fully grasping a concept, which is a for generating a genuine intuition, must affect reliability, must at least increase the degree of reliability. This is the first question. Second question is kind of a skeptic approach here. Now I'm acting like the nasty skeptic that asks you. Think of the entailment interpretation. Do we have a strong enough reasons to eliminate the possibility that entailment interpretation is, after all, the result of a very, very effective and recalcitrant motivational factor that still then would let it seem like it's a result of a bias? It's just a stronger bias.
Yeah.
Good. Kiichi, you wanna start?
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I have two responses to the first question. Yeah. So, yeah, actually, so our contention, basically, our contention is that acquisition expertise is different from reliability expertise. So the existence of acquisition expertise among philosophers do not necessarily guarantee the reliability of philosophers' intuitions. However, I also think there is a connection between reliability expertise and acquisition expertise, because I think if acquisition expertise, if philosophers have acquisition expertise, in some senses, we can say philosophers' intuitions are more reliable than novices' intuitions. So first, if lay peoples do not have genuine intuitions, while philosophers do have genuine intuitions, we can say that reliability of folk intuitions are zero because they do not have genuine intuitions, while philosophers' intuitions reliabilities are greater than zero because philosophers have intuitions. So in this very minor sense, we can say that if philosophers have acquisition expertise, our intuitions are reliable than lay people's intuitions. And second, and this is much more decent. We can say in much more decent sense, philosophers' intuitions are more reliable than folk intuition, lay people's intuitions, because in this the idea of journey intuitions is relied on Biela's proposal, and in Biela's paper, he argues that he proposed a modal reliabilism, and according to modal reliabilism, depending on the the level of possession of the concept, and also depending on the cognitive conditions, the number of a priori truths we can recognize increases. So if philosophers have the fully possess the philosophical concept, and also being in the better cognitive conditions, maybe it is possible that philosophers are able to recognize a much more a priori truths about some philosophical concept compared to novices. And I think in this sense, maybe it is possible that philosophers' intuitions are more reliable than folk intuitions, lay people's intuitions, even if philosophers' intuitions are susceptible to distorting factors. So this is my answer to your first question. And
so maybe I can say a little bit in addition to it, which is that this is something so there's a paper, so there's a manuscript that we are working on, and then in the paper we talk a little bit about reliability issue. What we say is that maybe reliability issue has been exaggerated a little bit, because even if it is true that philosophers' intuitions are sensitive to the order effect or the framing effect, maybe it's not going to be such a huge problem, because maybe, for example, chess master's intuition can be sensitive to some order effect or whatever, or mathematicians' intuitions can be sensitive to some order effect or framing effect or whatever. But still, nobody is gonna deny that they do have genuine intuitions. They are better in some sense. So, maybe the kind of distorting factors people talk about in X5 not going to be such a huge problem. So that's one of the reasons why we're not going to focus on that kind of problem, like a distorting factor problem, because probably they're not going to pose such a great challenge to the idea of philosophical expertise. So rather, we focus on slightly different kind of expertise. So that's what we're going to say in a paper anyway. So that's an excellent point. That's a very good point. And then your second question, Nevia, so you said that entailment can be a bias in some sense because it could be motivated or something. Is that what you said?
So I had this doubt that maybe this entailment interpretation may still be the result of, but this kind of error may be still, rather than, it seems like the interpretation in the entailment interpretation is like there we have a kind of evidence that there is a conceptual confusion. It's not really this kind of error is not really about a bias. It's not the result of a bias. It's more a pure conceptual confusion. Right. So my point is, are we sure that is not a result of a bias? Do we have a good reason to eliminate the possibility? Can we eliminate the possibility that rather than being a conceptual confusion is indeed the result of a very powerful bias?
I see. Bias like what, for example, so are you thinking about something
Bias,
like
I was thinking, for example, of some kind of strong motivation
I see,
or
I see,
strong desire, something very powerful
I see.
that then will deliver some kind of a consistent error.
I see, that makes sense. So the idea, so one possibility is that the kind of sorry, but the kind of scenario, so we talk about the French fry, John. Probably it's not so strongly. Okay, there's no strong motivating thing in that scenario. I do understand that typical examples people talk about in free will debate and the X-File on free will, people talk about some crimes and kind of punishments, the kind of cases where we are inclined to take some kind of reactive attitudes, like get emotional. These are typical cases. I agree with that. But the scenario here is like, it's just like a John having French fries. It's not very motivating, I think. So at least, but but still, so on that particular understanding, one particular possibility of motivating reasoning, I don't think that's plausible. But I do agree with you that we can't rule out the possibility of some kind of bias is doing the work rather than conceptual confusion. I don't think we can rule it out. Kiichi, do you want to? Do you have something else?
I agree with Kengo's responses. Yeah, I also do not think we have successfully excluded the possibility that people have some kind of biased tendency to answer that that particular universe is bypassing universes. So, but I also think we have succeeded in providing additional evidence that people do conceptually misunderstand what determinism is.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. I know this second point of mine was really skeptic in nature. I don't think it's possible to eliminate this possibility. Of course, that kind of take it for granted, but I just was thinking, because the scenario that everything is determined is a very scary. So that's why
I
I'm
see.
thinking. Yeah.
I see. That's a good point. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, Victoria.
Thank you. This is a very interesting topic. I've been a philosopher for a long time, and I find that things get more complicated rather than clearer. So I'm not quite sure whether I possess more full concepts now than I did when I was a student. But anyway, it's this idea of full possession of a concept that I wanted to ask you about. I think for Biela, to say that full possession of a concept is incompatible with conceptual confusion is actually a tautology. So it's not really giving us a definition of what possession of a full concept is. So I'd like to hear more about why you think you can define a genuine intuition with full possession of a concept. And as a secondary question that follows from that, what would you say if someone asks, well, if we have full possession of a concept, why do we need intuition? We have full possession of the concept.
Okay, maybe I'll start, and Kiichi, if you have anything else, you can add to it. So you are right. So as I said in my part, so this is not explicit definition of full possession of concept. I haven't done that. Biela didn't do that, if I remember correctly. So as I said, this is just a necessary condition for you to have fully possessing a concept. A necessary condition is that, you know, you are not conceptually confused about C. And is it circular? I'm not entirely sure. If you understand conceptual confusion as something like a lacking full possession of concept, then like that's circular. But it's not. That's not how it is supposed to work. So just, you know, this is more like I don't know. Just looking at the example, I think the example will help. So the Burgess case, there's this intuitive sensing which can, in this case, doesn't fully possess the concept arthritis. Then I guess, I mean, at least I have this intuition that there's a sense in which he doesn't fully understand the concept arthritis. And why is it? Well, because of his conceptually confused belief that he has arthritis in his time. So that's the idea. And then, you know, the Beeler's, so this formulation expresses this intuitive idea that fully possessing the concept C is incompatible with conceptual confusion about C. So for example, this example, so this is a nice example for showing that. Probably that's not circular, I guess. Yeah, and about your second question, why we have intuitions? Well,
No, so it was why we need intuitions if we have full possession of a concept. But I think that's actually well, we're not going to have time for you to answer that at this point because it's yeah, it's quite complicated.
right. Yeah. Okay. So okay.
Just one quick response.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that so fully possessing a concept C is different from fully recognizing the a priori truth about that concept. So what George Miller says is when we fully possessing a concept, depending on the cognitive conditions, we are able to intuit a priori truth about that concept C. So fully possessing fully possessing the concept of determinism is different from fully understanding or fully recognizing a priori truth about determinism. So that's my quick response. So that's why we need intuitions in order to recognize, in order to capture the priori truth about determinism, whether, for example, like whether free will is compatible with determinism or not.
Well, this looks like a perfect time for us to wrap up by one more time thanking our speakers.
Thank you.
The queue was
Thanks
not
a lot.
empty, but perhaps interested parties could reach out to either of you. I'm sure if you wouldn't mind, I could pass along your contact information.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
great.
Any comments can be helpful. So
Okay. Oh, sorry.
yeah. No. We haven't shared with you our slides. So if that's helpful, we can send it to you.
Yeah, if you care to
so
send them
that
to me,
you
I
can
can
share.
certainly pass them along. And with that, I guess we will adjourn here. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another round of applause for you.
Bye.
Okay, thanks so much. And indeed, next time, perhaps it could be in person. That would be wonderful. So
Yeah,
we'll
definitely.
discuss that
Yeah.
possibility in the future, I'm sure. Take care.
Yeah, definitely. Bye. Thank you. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Nivea. Thanks, Ben.